Hey, what's up guys? It's Pedro here from NoobCoder.com, and in this tutorial we're going to talk about the rest and spread operator. So to get started, let's say I wanted to create a function that basically adds numbers together. But let's take it a step further and let's say I want a function that basically can add an infinite amount of numbers up. So how would I do that? Well, I could use the rest operator. So I could say dot dot dot, and let's call it numbers as a parameter. And basically, you'll see in a moment what the rest operator does. So let's actually print this out onto the console. And we could call it. And within here, I could pass in as many arguments as I want. So I could say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then with a semicolon. Let's save it, head over to Chrome, run it, and you can see that numbers actually gets converted into an array. So we passed in 5 arguments, and those arguments, these values get inserted into our array. So if I was just to switch this off to 1, 2, 3, save it, you see that we will get an array of 1, 2, 3. Now let's say I want to pass more than one parameter. So how would I do that? Well, you would do it like you would any other parameter. So if I was to pass in name, for example. And let's actually print out name so we can see that name is being passed in. And let's pass another argument. And I'm just going to call it Pedro. So if I save this and execute it, you see that Pedro gets printed. And we get 1, 2, 3. And basically it's because it matches up. If I pass in Pedro as an argument, Pedro gets matched up with name. And then here, 1, 2, 3 gets matched up with this rest operator. But let's take a look at what would happen if I reverse this. So let's say numbers, and then I pass in name. So let's remove this. Pass in the argument Pedro, save it, head over to Chrome, refresh, and you can see rest parameter must be the last formal parameter. And the reason for that is, since this is the rest operator, and this could take in as many arguments as you pass in, it doesn't know when to stop. So it sees that I'm passing in 1, 2, 3, it gets to Pedro, and it would add Pedro to this numbers array. But obviously that's not what we want. We just want 1, 2, 3. So the rule of thumb is when you're using the rest operator is always have it listed as the last parameter. So that pretty much wraps it up for the rest operator. So let's actually talk about the spread operator. Now, the spread operator is basically the reverse of the rest operator. So if I say let, and now I declare a numbers array, and I was to give it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in this example, let's say I want to find the max value within that array. So I could say max val is going to be equal to math.max. Now, if you're not familiar with the math.max method, basically it takes a bunch of arguments. So if I pass it in 5 numbers, right? So if I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it'll basically return what's the max number in the arguments that I'm passing in. But what I can do is, I have an array here. I could use the spread operator and say dot 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 numbers. And now if I save this, actually let's print out the max value so we can see that we're getting the right number. Now let's save it, head over to Chrome, refresh, and you can see that the max value within that array was 5. So in other words, what's happening when I use the spread operator is it's getting each of these values and passing it in as its own argument. So what it's doing effectively is doing something like this: number 0, numbers index 1, etc. So you can see that the spread operator is a lot more easier than doing it yourself. So I could just say ... numbers. And this will work for any size array. It could be 100 of length, it could be 1,000 of length, doesn't matter. Another thing you could do with the spread operator is, let's say I want new numbers. Let's create a new number array. So I'm going to say numbers 2. And within here, I'm going to say 6, 7, 8. But in here, I could use the spread operator and I could pass in numbers. And let's actually see what we get in our new array. Pass that in, save it, Chrome, refresh, and you can actually see that it spreads out our array. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is our newly created array using the spread operator. But we can also use it with strings. So to give an example of this, let's actually delete this. And let's just work with our numbers array. So in our last value that we're going to pass in, I'm just going to say A, B, C, and D. But this time we could use the spread operator on this. So let's actually print out our numbers array to see what's happening. Now let's save it, head over to Chrome, run it, and you can see that our string gets broken down into its individual parts. So A, B, C, and D. Now, to give one more example of this, we can actually use our math max function that we used previously. So I could say something like this. I could say let max is going to be assigned math.max. And within here, instead of passing an array and then using the spread operator, I could pass in a string. So I could say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's use the spread operator on that. And now let's print out what the max is. Let's save it, head over to Chrome, run it, and you can see that the max value within that string was 6. So it basically breaks this string up into its individual values. So 1 is basically 1, 2 is 2, 3 is 3, etc. And then obviously 6 is the highest value, so 6 gets returned from the math.max function. And that's pretty much it for the rest and the spread operator. So the rest basically takes in a bunch of arguments, converts it into our array. The spread operator basically takes an array and breaks it down into its individual values.